Titulado PISA, uma história de sucesso. É um projeto que é um projeto financiado pela Fundação para a Ciência e Tecnologia, que envolve um conjunto de investigadores, a maior parte aqui presentes e a assistir a esta sessão. Houve aqui um aviso e eu chamo a atenção e pergunto se há alguma objeção, porque estes webinars têm sido gravados. Presumo que não há nenhuma objeção, mas nós vamos manter a gravação até para depois figurar no nosso site e poder ser trabalhado pela equipe. Portanto, como estava eu a dizer, estes conjuntos de webinars têm como objetivo permitir um espaço de interface entre a reflexão que temos vindo a realizar no projeto, que a equipa tem vindo a realizar no projeto, com outros contributos nacionais e internacionais. Os nossos dois convidados de hoje, participantes, são o João Luís Horta Neto, que tem, embora seja consultor do projeto, tem, a maior parte das vezes, participado nas suas atividades e reuniões e tem contribuído ativamente, não para o trabalho empírico, mas para a reflexão que temos vindo a realizar e só me resta agradecer. Le deuxième, c'est Romuald Normand. C'est un vieil et toujours jeune ami que j'ai connu il y a une vingtaine d'années à Lyon, où il était non seulement à l'université, mais à l'actuel IFE, Institut français de l'éducation, à l'occasion Institut national de recherche pédagogique. C'est ça, Romuald, non? C'est le nom.
Oui, c'est ça. Oui.
C'est ça, non?
Une bonne mémoire.
Et qui est un des auteurs plus productifs critiquement sur le PISA et d'autres instruments, d'autres surveys d'évaluation et surtout les conséquences politiques au niveau de la régulation. Eu agradeço, je remercie bien à Romuald aussi cette participation et être avec nous pour débattre. Muito obrigado a todos. Estes webinars são relativamente curtos, nós temos tido uma duração entre 1 hora, 1 hora e 15, 1 hora e 30 no máximo, e eu dou de seguida a palavra à Teresa para conduzir, fazer a apresentação dos nossos convidados. Teresa, a palavra é tua e a condução agora também é tua. Muito, muito obrigado a todos que aqui estão e espero que seja uma boa sessão de debate, de apresentação, de ideias para os trabalhos que cada um desenvolve em locais bem diferentes. Eu vejo aqui alguns colegas brasileiros, por além dos portugueses. Uma boa tarde a todos. Teresa, a palavra é tua.
Ok, obrigada. Boa tarde a todos, a todas. Eu, se calhar, ia só fazer mais 1 ou 2 apontamentos relativamente ao perfil dos candidatos. Farei em português, julgo, e eventualmente depois também um bocadinho em inglês, até por causa um dos nossos oradores de hoje. Portanto, vamos arrancar com a intervenção do professor João Luís Horta Neto. O professor António Teodoro já frisou que é nosso consultor no projeto PISA, mas é também investigador no Instituto Nacional de Estudos e Pesquisas Educacionais Anísio Teixeira, o INEP, no Brasil. Portanto, é doutorada em Política Social, com mestrado na área da Educação da Universidade de Brasília, e, portanto, tem trabalhado muito estas questões da avaliação educacional, dos sistemas, das instituições, dos programas, dos planos, e em articulação com as políticas públicas, e tem trabalhado também esta questão dos inquéritos de larga escala. O nosso segundo convidado é o professor Romualdo Normand, que é professor de Sociologia atualmente na Universidade de Strasbourg, na Faculdade de Ciências Sociais, é investigador também, professor visitante na Universidade de Pequim, e tem trabalhado sobretudo nas áreas da educação europeia e comparada, e para além disso tem também uma atividade de animador e dinamizador de uma das redes justamente sobre as sociologias da educação europeia da Associação Europeia de Investigação Educacional. Agora farei brevemente em inglês. So I'm going to present briefly our two speakers. First, Professor João Luís Horta Neto, researcher at the Brazilian National Institute of Studies and Educational Research, PhD in Social Policy and Master in Education from the University of Brasilia, and a long experience in educational assessment, institutions, educational programs, systems, and have been working mainly on the public policies and educational evaluation and large-scale evaluation, and also about development of instruments for large-scale educational assessments. And then our second speaker, Professor Romualdo Normand. He's professor of sociology at the University of Strasbourg, Faculty of Social Sciences in France, researcher, and also visiting professor at Beijing Normal University, and he works mainly on comparative and European education policies and politics, and he is also convener of one of the networks of the European Educational Research Association, Sociologies of European Education, I think. So now we are going to start our webinar, first with Professor João Luís Horta Neto, and then with Professor Romualdo, and after these two moments, we have, I think, about 20-30 minutes for questions. Okay? So, Professor João Luís Horta Neto, é consigo agora.
Can you see my slide? Is it okay?
Sim, vê-se
okay.
bem, professor.
Sim.
Perfeito.
So, thank you so much. I'm happy to present to you some of my thoughts and my investigations about PISA and national curriculum in Brazil. First of all, that is a short summary, an overview of the strategy used by PISA to publicize its results, the proficiency scales. That I think that's the most important thing to discuss about PISA and about the inputs for educational policies. A summary of Brazilian education highlighting the importance of federal LSA named SAEB and PISA, and the use of SAEB results to justify the need for a national curriculum, 3 different periods and their policies, and a final remark. First of all, I studied all the publications of PISA between 2000 and 2018. And I call that the weakness of a pattern that wants to be global. I used all the reports, and it is possible to see 4 interwoven concepts: knowledge, skills, competencies, and literacy. Based on these 4 concepts, each area of knowledge developed its constructs, definitions of what each test is measuring. To disseminate the results and provide a pedagogical interpretation of the proficiency measured by the test, figures that express the results, interpretations are put forward of the proficiency scales that describe the tasks which the students were able to carry out in the applied tests. These descriptions are made for proficiency intervals, known as levels, within the PISA scale. There are 6 levels. And one of the most important of these levels is level 2, named basic. It describes skills which should have been developed by 15 years students. Due to the technical procedures adopted, only a few of the items used in the PISA tests can be made public. So, the importance of the proficiency scales for the general public to understand what is being measured by PISA and what to do with their results. To justify my work, I analyzed the proficiency scale using this method. For each area of knowledge, random excerpts from descriptions present in the proficiency scales were selected. In reading, I chose interpret and make inferences. In sciences, I choose interpret data. In mathematics, interpretation and arguments given by the students. The selected excerpts refer to the same task present at all levels of the scale. So I look for the same expert in all levels of the scales. Other excerpts might have been chosen with no impact on the quality and validity of the analysis done. So let's start with reading. And that's the definition of what is reading literacy according to report of 2009 of OECD. Reading literacy is understanding, using, reflecting on, and engaging with written tests in order to achieve one's goals, to develop one's knowledge and potential, and to participate in society. For me, it's a fluid and imprecise concept. But the most important is analyzing the scale. As you see, we have I bring to you level 6, level 4, and level 2, and in these 3 levels, I mark the inferences that it was a category that was discussed in this scale. But as you see, in level 1B, there's an information that does not make reference to inference, interpret and make inference in the test. So there's a one can think that for almost 20% of Brazilian students, they cannot make inferences based on the items that are that are present on PISA tests. That's an impossible construction, because it is not possible that 20% of students in Brazil cannot make any kind of inferences on any kind of tests. So the inferences that are measured by PISA in these tests, the students cannot make inferences, but in other tests, maybe they could. So the information that goes to the press is against the public schools in Brazil. And it is very preoccupied. That's the science. In the science happens the same. Scientific literacy is the ability to engage with science-related issues and with the ideas of science as a reflective citizen. A scientific literate person is willing to engage and so forth. And here I marked the task I choose to interpret data, and I marked in red some excerpts that are present in this description. In level 6, they are able to discriminate between relevant and irrelevant information. What is that? No one can understand what are being measured and what is this, and what this phrase is important for education policy. What to do with this sort of information. And the same in level 4, draw appropriate conclusions that go beyond the data. What's that? And level 2, identify the questions being addressed in a simple experimental design. And in level 1A, they say about that the students require a low level of cognitive demand. What is that? So all the phrases, all the expressions used on the scale of science, and even in reading, and the same in mathematics, makes some kind of give some kind of information that is not appropriate to use in educational policies. But the most important thing, if you see level below 1B, there's no, the OCDE does not specify the skills developed for the students. So the press understand that for 4% of Brazilian students, they know anything about science. It's not possible. The same to mathematics, and in mathematics, it's the most important information. Below level 1, one of the levels of this, the proficiency scale, they say there are no skills identified. So the information for the press and for the public is that about 41% of Brazilian students do not know mathematics. It's impossible. It's an impossible conclusion. So that's the information PISA give, and despite the problems pointed out in the procedure used to disseminate its results, the scale, PISA was considered a reference for formulating curricular standards in Brazil, and all the instruments that was constructed in my country. An overview of Brazilian education. Basic education between first and 12th grades, 182,000 schools, 82% are public and maintained by state and municipal governments, and 49 million enrollments. Every 2 years, the federal government uses LSA, named SAEB. That's the name of LSA federal test in Brazil, to measure students' achievements on 5th, 9th, and 12th grades in almost all schools, a test that is 30 years old. It was created in 2007, an index named EDEP, a Quality National Index of Education, parameterized concerning to PISA, varying from 0 to 10. This index is based on SAEB's results and educational flow. Retention rates in Brazil are a huge problem. Each school has a goal determined by the federal government, and this goal was not discussed, it was imposed by the federal government to all schools. There's a national goal. IDEB by 2021 must reach index 6, index 6 equals the 2003 average PISA score for OECD countries. So there's a link between what happens in Brazil and what is happening in PISA in OECD countries. And a consequence of all these policies in Brazil, mainly to prepare for the SAEB and to improve their in-depth index. In 2019, 53%, almost 3,000 of municipalities have their LSA test using the same federal model. So everybody is preparing their students to the test and to raise their EDEB index. The use of SAEB results. I separate all the since the end of 1990. I separated 3 periods and I studied the policies that are present in each period. And so 3 different periods and their policies. The first period, in the beginning of SAEB, Brazil was commanded by center and right-wing parties between 1994 to 2002 by Fernando Henrique Cardoso. The problem on education policy was SAEB's low results that indicate the lack of effectiveness of existing and practiced curricula. Students are not learning satisfactorily. That's what the policy indicates. I'm not reading this one because of our time, and I go to the next period. The period commanded by center and left-wing parties between 2003 and 2016, the period of Lula and Dilma. The problem in educational policy, again, is SAEB is low results. So even though we're talking about different periods, different parties, the problem is almost the same. SAEB is low results. And in this period, this SAEB low results indicate that students are not learning satisfactorily. Not having a national curriculum wasn't a problem, but we have to improve their learning. In this period, and this is important for the work, there are some solutions are implemented. First, implementation of accountability policies with federal programs linked to performance goals. LSA to all school, EDEP, as I told you, and goals for each school set by MEC, as I told you. There is a discussion even though the implementation of accountability policies, there are parts of the government discussed how to improve curricula, and not talking about just one curriculum, national curriculum, but to improve curricula that are implemented by municipalities and state governments. Based on 5 texts, MEC, Ministry of Education, promoted a curriculum national seminar with 1,500 participants from municipal and state education secretaries and national entities to debate the curriculum conceptions in their elaboration process. So they tried to open as much as is possible the discussions about curriculum. MEC sent 750,000 copies of these tests to basic education schools and education departments to amplify the debate. It was created the Learning and Development Education Working Group to present a version of the BNC, that was a guideline to curriculum, Base Nacional Comum in Portuguese, to guide the improvement of local curricula. During the group discussions, there was a fear that the term expectations could give rise to a BNC that would define formulations that favor its use to measure student performance in external evaluations. The solution was to rename the group as Learning and Development Rights in order to reinforce the idea of education as a right, accessible to all and distant from any performance measure. So in the same government, we have 2 different positions. One group that wants to implement accountability policies, and the other one that is against those policies. And those 2 groups are live in the same area in Ministry of Education. And there is another important thing that happened in this period is the number of corporate funded foundations seeking solution to education problems, and these foundations increased a lot. From 2016 and the actual period, we have Temer and Bolsonaro as presidents, and the problem is the same, SAEB's low results. And now this SAEB's low results indicate the ineffectiveness of existing curricula. So we need to change this. And the conditions to solve during the previous period, Lula and Dilma, corporate funded foundations brought together many experts to discuss the implementation of a national curriculum and education reforms, inspired mostly by the American Common Core. These specialists took on critical positions in the new government and brought the solutions developed in those foundations. So during almost 10 years, those foundations were working in a national curriculum based on American Common Core, and as the government changed, they go to the important. Hello.
Pode continuar. Foi alguém que ligou o microfone.
They took important positions in Ministry of Education and brought all that work to the Ministry of Education. The solutions for that problem about ineffectiveness of existing curricula. In only 1 month, the BNCC, the Base Nacional Comum Curricular, curriculum standard, in other words, was set. So as they are working about 10 years outside the government, when they come to the government in 11 years, in 11 months, they approved this curriculum standard. And what is going to what we are going to see is more testing. The federal government wants to expand testing to all students for 2nd to 12th and questionnaires to access early childhood education conditions annually. So more accountability policies. What is this national standards, the BNCC in Portuguese? The document is structured around terms like literacy, competencies, and skills in the same way as PISA, but different from PISA. The document has 600 pages, and only one of those pages presents all the theoretical references of what they mean about literacy, competencies, and skills, as if it was so familiar terms that they do not have to discuss about this. Otherwise, they define competency as the mobilization of knowledge, concepts and procedures, skills, practical, cognitive, and socio-emotional, attitudes, and values to solve complex demands of everyday life, without indicating any reference or discussion of this choice. So they choose those terms and not discuss what they came from. Despite presenting this concept, competence is treated throughout the test as if it is just a skill set. And a proof of this is that the document lists 1,183 elementary school and 221 high school skills for all grades, distributed in 6 areas of knowledge, Portuguese, mathematics, sciences, and other areas. The skills of a given area of knowledge and for a given grade describe in detail what the students must learn. This form favors the construction of LSA items. So more accountability, more LSI tests, and so forth. As final remarks, the criticism to PISA has no relation with possible methodological problems of the instrument. The criticism to PISA that I bring to you has no relation with possible methodological problems of the instrument, but rather with the rationale used to disseminate its results. When analyzed closed, the descriptions of this case convey little information regarding what the students were able to do in the test, and sometimes they provide information incorrectly, as I show you. Experts are the ones who define how schooling should be developed around the world without the need of broader and extended debates. And as happened in all the debate about the national standards. In Brazil, like all other solutions in the past year, the BNCC will further expand accountability policies. BNCC increases the LSA influence in the educational process and the pressure for results for both schools and teachers. Despite preaching flexibility and the development of critical and creative reasoning, BNCC will contribute to compartmentalized and standardized teaching. That's it. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Professor João Luís Orcanedo. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. Je donne maintenant la parole à notre deuxième orateur, professeur Romuald Normand. We are not listening you. You have to Micro, please. Okay, now.
Can you hear me now? Yes?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Okay, fine. Can you see the slide?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Oh, okay. I was there. So thank you very much, Antonio, for your invitation, Teresa. I'm very glad to be with you today and to share some knowledge and research about the PISA survey. I'm interested in the international circulation of the PISA survey and its conditions of reception in France. I'm talking about PISA paradigm, considering that the survey is the most visible part of an international metrology or international metrics that circulating worldwide. We speak of policy traveling or policy borrowing and lending. There's lots of researchers who are studying the circulation of the PISA survey today. And what I'm interested in is how it reorients the public education policies in France for several decades. So I'm not going to repeat all the content of the paper I sent to Antonio, but you should be published soon. So I think you will be able to access to it, and I won't have time to go deeper in this paper. But I will try to focus on the reception of PISA in the French context, and I'm going to share you some research findings because my thought has evolved since I sent the paper to Antonio, and I continue the inquiry, and I get other research findings which has not been yet published, but I wanted to share them with you today. So I will say that I'm interested in two things. How the PISA survey and the PISA paradigm, because you've got some French-speaking studies who are being interested in the reception of the PISA survey, but I am in a kind of disagreement with these French-speaking research studies because they, of course, they study the publication of the PISA survey in the French context, and they speak about the ignorance of the PISA survey in its condition of reception on some dupes which have been raised expressed by interest groups like trade union and so on. But I think they ignore two facts I'm interested in, is the contentment of expertise and then the fabrication of the statistical argument in the reception of the PISA paradigm in France. And I'm interested in the role of certain actors acting as representatives and playing a role as translator, mediator, or broker of the PISA paradigm. And they do it, they speak, of course, in the public debate and in the media, and they do it on behalf of a modernizing compromise that I provisorily name the French third way. So as a result, I'm differ for the French-speaking studies who tend to reduce public action around PISA to a few disembodied bodies, the ministry, the Directorate of Evaluation in France, and in doing that, they make invisible other spaces of cooperation, but also of competition without the within the technostructure, Napoleonic technostructure in France, and there is an action of some actors of this technostructure, this nobility of state that Bourdieu wrote about, with some colleges, circles, or networks that are sometimes visible, but sometimes invisible. And I try to map these networks and to show their rules of game. So what I'm going to present first, quickly, because I don't have much time, the genesis of the PISA survey on its international circulation. Then spatialities on scale of the PISA paradigm in the French policy context. And at the end, some fresh representative who use the PISA paradigm to promote a reformist political agenda, what I named the French third way. First, the genesis. I don't have time to describe all the stages that led to PISA being placed at the heart of the indicators of the European method of coordination, and of course its condition of reception in the French context. But let's say that all began with the ECAPE. You've got on the left here the Exploratory Committee on Assessing the Progress of Education project in the United States, under the administration Johnson-Kennedy, where it was the first time a federal evaluation system for the skills of US students were designed, and it gathered lots of political parties from the different parts of the US. And then this project ECAPE was updated in the 1980s under the term NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress, to serve the objective of the US federal policy of basic skills and accountability, with the development of testing, which has been ensured by the ETS, the Educational Testing Service. This story is well known, so I don't spend much time on it, but the Educational Testing Service was a testing agency which has been created by the US Navy and was responsible after the Second World War of the development of the SAT, the US College Exam Entrance Test, which on the ETS took the expertise on technical leadership, not only in the NAEP under the influence of the Department of US Education, but it was this methodology was transposed in the PISA survey. So another influence is the IEA, initially a small international association of psychometricians hosted by the UNESCO and its Institute for Planning, and it was taken over by the OECD to develop large surveys on mathematics, such as TIMSS, and then PISA. And then you've got an international project, the INES project, which played an important role in the development of the survey, but also in the evaluation of educational system in the US style. France participated in this project on behalf of the DEP here, the Directorate of Assessment and Forecast, under the influence of the ministry, the French Ministry of Education. But the INES project was a mean for the OECD and Eurostat, the Office of Statistics of Europe, to join their effort to develop the statistic and indicators of lifelong learning and the indicators and benchmark of the open method of coordination. So PISA became an instrument of international trans-governance, which was developed under the INES project with the support of the OECD and the Federal Department of Education. I have to say that there were struggles in this orientation between the English-speaking countries and the Nordic countries, which were again the development of accountability systems. But strangely, France supported US and the UK in defending the development of accountability system on policy. So this story is well known. I have myself contributed to this story in mapping different epistemic networks on epistemic communities involved in the building, the development of this international metrology. And I published a paper on this. You've got the reference here. So the study of PISA invite us to the development of a sociology of measurement. There are some other people who are developing this sociology. I'm thinking about Luis Miguel Carvalho in Portugal, Soteria Greek in the UK, or you've got Radhika Gorer, for example, in Australia. The idea is to try to explain the principles and the components of this international and European calculability as instrumentalism and political technology. And in this sociology of measurement, I take an example to show you what is the statistical and political reasoning behind these indicators and these data. Here you've got the indicators of the open method of coordination, a European one, in education and training. And as I show, these indicators correspond well to the orientation and trajectory of the French education policy led by third-wave reformists. For example, the policy of school dropout, but also basic skills. That's some policies which has been developed by France, like other countries. What we are interested here is that PISA is used as an indicator to measure the effectiveness of educational policies, and the PISA data are integrating as indicators of the open method of coordination. And of course, all these indicators correspond to an economic vision, to an economization of education policies, because early school leaving, dropout, data on dropouts, and data on the PISA are used by economists of human capital theory, and they measure the different way to measure the investment in education. Of course, there is adaptation, translations, hybridizations of all these indicators, benchmarks, and data. I don't have much time to present this translation here, but it's not very original to say that PISA reception is different from one country to another. We know all this. What is most interesting is to study the process of translation itself, and species and actors who participate to this translation, for what reasons, for what compromises, for what kind of links, and with others, with using the actor network theory inspired by Bruno Latour and Michel Calon, and is very in France, and is very useful to do that. So, inspired by this actor network theory, I go now to the French context and to explore the scales and spatialities that the PISA paradigm reveals in France. Well, I have to say that French epistemic cultures are related to the measurement in education, and this interest in France for measurement is rooted in a positivist tradition that has largely contributed to the great Republican narrative, from Condorcet, the mathematician and philosopher, to Auguste Comte. And we can say that this measurement rely on a metaphorical language, such as the idea of necessary culture of evaluation that has to be framed, that has been framed as a political argument, while masking, in fact, in France, the stakes of this methodology deployed by the Ministry of Education for many years. There's no PISA debate in France compared to Germany. So this explains why calculation centers such as the DEP here, you've got the DEP here, which is the Directorate of Assessment and Forecast of the French Ministry of Education, and the IREDU somewhere here, the IREDU, which is a research center. The DEP and the IREDU have played a role in the creation of these calculative instruments. And more recently, you've got the Paris School of Economics or the LIEP at Sciences Po, which have been very active in developing this kind of measurement of evaluation. For me, a calculation center, following Bruno Latour on the actor network theory, a calculation center is a hybrid collective entity or an agency equipped with instruments and with the capacity to produce metrics, to formalize survey procedures, to process them and to analyze them in different written or media support. Close to the DEP, you've got the CENESCO, which is, sorry, here somewhere in my, well, I'll put the CENESCO, I can't remember it. Anyway, I can go deeper in it. Anyway, you've got the CENESCO, which is another calculation center, and the CENESCO has played an important role in supporting the educational policy of the socialist minister Vincent Payon since from 2012, while operating as a platform for capitalization and dissemination of some research funding in education, and of course the PISA survey findings. And it was chaired by the sociologist Nathalie Mons, who had led the conference entitled Refunding the School System, with the support of, on the direct link of the minister. So there are not only calculation centers involved in the map you have in front of you. I don't have much time to go in detail in this map, but I have tried to distinguish 4 types of space of interest in the reception of the PISA paradigm according to the degree of publicization of statement and association between actors. Because the space of interest can be public and accessible to stakeholders or lay people. It can give rise to a formal association between entities under the authority of an institution such as the Ministry of Education, but it can be informal association, a voluntary association, more opportunistic and flexible. The knowledge produced can be directly oriented toward policy making, for example, in proposal or reformist statements, or it can be oriented toward expertise, the production of data or instruments, or expert on scientific statements. So it is possible to characterize what I named the public policy forum. It means a more or less institutionalized spaces governed by specific rules and dynamics, within which actors have debates impacting on education policy. For example, the Commission of the National Debate on the Future of the School System, chaired by Claude Tellot, who was former head of the DEP and president of the High Council for the Evaluation of the School System. It was important, this public policy forum, to legitimate the PISA paradigm. You got the arena of expertise. An arena of expertise is a social space in which actors aim to produce recommendation, guidelines, or reports to orientate the education policy by framing educational problems and then defining and sharing solutions. As an example, during the French presidency of Europe, in which was reflecting the building of international indicators, PISA, and their use in education policy, a joint seminar was organized at the University of Paris 12 Créteil on November 2021-2008 under the presidency of the European Conference of Inspectorates in Education, with European and French inspectors, as well as members of the Ministry on the DEP, the French Directorate, the French Institute of Education, and on the CIEP, the French Institute of International Studies in Education. And discussion were focused on the self-evaluation of schools in Europe and means to develop school accountability in the French education system. Another arena of expertise is the AFAE, or Association Française des Acteurs de l'Éducation, Association of French Actors in Education. It's another arena for expertise. This association is a kind of meeting and debate platform for policymakers from the Ministry of Education, and it allows them to confront their vision in educational reforms. It is largely managed by members of the General Inspectorate who have also held position in ministers' cabinet, or as heads of ministerial department, or as superintendents, or as chairman of high councils. And it is also a place of exchange for middle-rank managers and those who want to rise in the hierarchy of the technostructure through informal cooptation procedures. You've got the Invisible College. The Invisible College associate experts and policymakers who meet informally to work together and produce expert knowledge with a view to influencing policymaking. But this Invisible College, because it is invisible, is not subject to publicity. Beyond the well-identified think tanks like Terra Nova, the Reformist Left, and the Montaigne Institute, the Reformist Right, I locate the Collège des Bernardins, which is funded by a Catholic foundation. It's a good example of these invisible colleges. It presents itself as a space of freedom that invite people to cross their view in order to understand the world and build a better future. It is organized as a research institute with several departments, gathering academics, theologians, and field workers, and they work fundamental questions, not only, of course, on the Christianity, but on education too. And Bernard Hugonnier, former deputy head for education at the OECD, who is professor at the Catholic Institute of Paris, and which is a member of the Institut Montaigne, the rightist think tank. He shared the school fellow working group, was co-director of the Collège des Bernardins, and he organized two seminars, one on school and republic, from 2014 to 2016, and it was followed by another seminar entitled School Efficiency, a Stake in Justice and Competitiveness. And the discussion brought together experts and policymakers from the public education system in a context where there is a strict separation between the church and the state, and these experts and policymakers from the right to the left focus on educational reforms that could be improved, that could improve equal opportunities and improve the efficiency of the education system. And of course, the PISA data, the PISA survey data were at the center of these exchanges and discussion. So I come to a reflexive presentation of these representatives of the PISA paradigm who demonstrate a kind of an epistemic authority of various types. I discussed this epistemic authority in the paper sent to Antonio. I have to say first that the ministry has a monopoly in governing by numbers, and he delegates expertise to its ministerial directorate, coupled with the report of the General Inspectorate and as an authority based on capacity. So it gives the impression of an objective measure detached from issues of reform desired by the government. But this expertise is reinforced by the regular creation of national high councils with mission to evaluate the education system, using PISA data as a background for the assessment and conclusion. So there is a delegation of authority to statistical and meteorological objects, as the sociology of science and technology has shown, and it's a way to provide evidence under an apparent realism and neutrality. But there's another form of ontological authority. It is based on the appeal to recognize external actors, and this ontological authority take the form of expert knowledge through the opinion of experts or official reports that legitimize decision-making by claiming to be relatively neutral and impartial, and it refers to people, texts, and institutions that represent the state of the world expected around the PISA survey through their discourses and their writing, and that contribute to give a reality in politics. So I don't have much time to go deeper in these discourses and in this writing, but I just give you an image of them. I've got the names. You can see on this network that I've established on the basis of co-publication, direct subordination relationship, or appointment to function in the French technocracy of the ministry. I have distinguished affinity relationship, membership relationship, or subordination of dependency relationship, while separating the left and the right reformist. So I don't have time to go deeper in this, and you don't know most of this name, but I can refer each name to a space of interest or to some link in justifying the PISA paradigm and the methodology which is linked to the PISA paradigm. It is very interesting that you've got, I could show, if I had time, I could show some link between some representative of the left and representative of the right that help to explain the movement, the recent movement toward a French third way, legitimizing the reception of the PISA survey. But what I've tried to do is to distinguish between these representatives who are able to mobilize allies in a more or less long-range networks, and representatives who benefit from a delegation of authority to implement reforms or to develop expert knowledge. Most often, this delegation is made by the Minister of Education itself. So a distinction can be made between representatives who connect entities and those who formulate theological statements that serve to legitimize the PISA reformist agenda on the basis of ideology or expert knowledge. So I try to differentiate what I name the organic expert. I have already mentioned the name of Claude Tellot in his function of head of the DEP and president of the Commission on the Future of the School System. It is quite characteristic of this organic expert formulating a theological statement, developing a culture of evaluation in the French education system. At the same time, Claude Tellot has largely oriented the DEP statistics toward new public management and accountability mechanisms. The reformist technocrat is the minister's man of trust who place this technocrat in a strategic position to implement reform and to legitimize reforms on decision making. But you've got too the moral entrepreneur. The moral entrepreneur is at the service of a group of interest to organize collective action on, in particular, to influence public decision and to make the PISA paradigm accepted in the public space and the media space. So it helped to facilitate decision making and to make decision making and policy making more acceptable. And you've got at least the political broker. The political broker is capable to make links between different networks and to make knowledge circulate between the different networks to legitimize the data or the knowledge linked to the data onto the PISA survey. So, for example, moral entrepreneur at the moment in the French education policy landscape, we've got Alain Boissineau, which is the voice of the Minister of Education. Alain Boissineau has been very occupied different position as a general inspectorate, a superintendent, a director of the head of the directorate of school, a president of the National Council, National Curriculum Council, or you've got political broker Alain Michel, which has been at the OECD, international expert. He has been close to the cabinet. He has been influent in the IFAE, and he has produced several papers to justify the reformist agenda related to the PISA survey. So that's it. I don't have time, I think, to give you a conclusion. So I stop there to leave place to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Romuald. And now, before the debate, some participants asked if the speakers could make their PowerPoints available in the chat. Professor João Luís Horta already said yes.
Yes, I share it with you.
Ok, vous pouvez rendre. Ok. Portanto, agora abriríamos um espaço para debate. Portanto, temos aqui duas hipóteses: ou colocam as vossas questões no próprio chat, ou então fazem uma intervenção oral abrindo o microfone. Se houver problemas com a tradução, temos aqui o colega Vitor Rosa, que pode fazer a passagem diretamente para o francês, aqui para o professor Romuald, não sei, ou se quiserem colocar diretamente em inglês, como queiram. Não sei se há alguém que queira colocar alguma questão. Comentário.
Eu posso perguntar ao professor Luís Horta qualquer coisa? Posso fazer a pergunta?
Pode, vou só fazer. Ok, sim, pode.
Fala em português ou fala em inglês?
Se perguntar em inglês, o Romualdo acompanha, não é? Também a discussão.
So I would like to know if the last reform in Brazil has already real results. If the teachers and the principals really made this reform in schools. And if there are results already.
Okay, that's a good question. As these reforms comes up-down, it's an up-down strategy. It was discussed outside the ministry and by a group that is outside the ministry, founded by those organizations, private organizations, and bring all the discussion inside the ministry. And the results is that all the curricula, the municipalities and the states curricula, are adapting to this national standards. What's gonna to happen? We don't know. There's no research about this. It is almost recent. We have 2 years of these reforms. But I think that will give more confusion than good space for discussion and good space for good learning, and because the teachers are not prepared for that. The training, the teacher training is not prepared for this modifications that happened. And I think that the most important is that tests will be improved, accountability will be improved, and by next time we will have the same how can I say, the same question. SAEB is demonstrating that students is low performing in tests, and another type of reforms, more accountability and so forth, and it's never ends until we, the educators, fight for a different way of viewing schools and teachers and teacher preparation and teacher training, I think. That's it.
Thank you.
Obrigada, professor João Luís. Obrigada, professor João Sampaio da Maia, pela questão. Não sei se há mais alguma questão que queiram colocar.
I could said, could I chair a text, a paper?
Sim, pode partilhar. Sim,
Pode
sim.
partilhar.
Não há restrições.
No, could I share? Where is that? Just a moment. Sorry. The first I would share is a statement of Angel Gurria, the General Secretary of OECD. Where is that? I think is that. No? No, sorry. Continua. Vou tentar descobrir e depois...
Meanwhile, may I go on with the question? And there are some answers or response or public opinions from teachers and principals in Brazil and in France about the reforms.
That's interesting in France because, for example, the PISA agenda, the PISA paradigm, has been sold to trade unions in different ways. For example, you've got a special ambassador of the OECD. His name is Éric Charbonnier, and he delivers regularly speeches in the public media in France to legitimize the interest of the PISA survey and to explain the rank of France, etc. And it has a very good echo nearby the media and nearby the trade unions too, in fact. So progressive, and you've got some sociologists like Christian Baudelot. Christian Baudelot was a former Marxist sociologist in the 70s. Perhaps you know his work, you know? He has developed very critical theory of the reproduction of the education system, you know, due to class structures on the exploitation of the working class students and so on. And he has showed two networks of pass, student pass, it was in the 1970s, l'école capitaliste en France, capitalist school in France. But in the 1980s, he moved to a legitimation of the human capital theory and this investment in education. And he wrote 300 pages on that for a special program, an incitative program on educational research, which was led at that time by Marie Durubella, another sociologist, and Denis Meuret. In a time when Marie Durubella and Denis Meuret, with the support of the French Ministry of Education, wanted to restructure educational research, to move educational research to more evidence-based research, according to aims in terms of effectiveness and equity. And later, Christian Baudelot has written a small book, a red small book, justifying the interest of the PISA survey and the relevance of this methodology. And because these were very close to leftist circles, reformist circles, the Socialist Party and trade union, and the Communist Party and its trade unions too, it has been accepted without any debate. So progressively, because of some voices and voices of sociologists of education in France, they participate to the legitimation of the PISA survey, its results and its paradigm in the French educational context. It explains why educators and the representative, contrary to other parts of Europe, as for example, there was no debate. And there is not much criticism from French researchers about the PISA survey, contrary to an international debate and lots of criticism which have been developed by sociologists of education outside France. That's a very strange mystery.
Thank you.
Posso colocar uma questão?
Sim.
Eu vou pôr uma questão ao professor Romualdo, mas vou colocar em francês. É sobre as desigualdades escolares. Monsieur Romuald, les performances, je pose la question en français, c'est plus facile pour moi et plus vite. Les performances des élèves français sont dans la moyenne mondiale en France, mais je pense qu'en France, il y a beaucoup d'égalités, des inégalités scolaires selon la dernière enquête PISA. Comment expliquez-vous ça?
If we look at the PISA scores, they are stable, at least since 2 decades, and there's not much variation, not much progress, not much decline in the average PISA scores of French students. But of course, if you have another reading and you have a more critical reading of the PISA score themselves, you can make a difference between an average and the internal measurement you can use from PISA scores, and you can compare, for example, some good students in France will have the same scores as Finnish students, and some bad students or failing students who have the same scores as perhaps some Brazilian students. So when you disaggregate the scores in PISA, and it's not me who's saying that, it's more people who are specialists in methods and in disaggregation of data, they observe that sometimes you've got more discrepancies within national education system than discrepancies at international level, which limits the interest of the scope of the international survey.
Posso colocar uma segunda questão? Tem a ver com o mapa que colocou. Monsieur Romuald, j'ai une deuxième question. J'ai regardé votre mapping et je regarde le collège de Bernardin et l'Institut Montaigne, que c'est un think tank, et la ligue d'enseignement très éloignée. Vous avez une explication pour ça?
Yes, I've got an explanation to that. It's an interesting movement, but I tried to, it's more an assumption. I can prove that by evidence, because what I say, I can prove it by evidence and by connection. But what is interesting is this Collège des Bernardins this seminar gather people like Claude Tello, like Nathalie Mons, like the current Minister of Education, some former heads of the General Directorate of Education, from the left, from the right. It's a capacity of Catholic groups and Catholic interest groups. There's a kind of awakening, a réveil, a kind of awakening of Catholic interest groups, and they are active to promote education policy reforms. And you can observe that at least since 10 years. They are active in the debate on secularism, for example. They are quite active. Is it very strange? Of course, it can be explained by the fact that they fear that the Republican Pact, the 1905 Act, which separate the church and the state, which force a compromise between Catholic interests and other interests, Protestant interests at least, under the idea that Catholic schools can be not completely funded by the state, but they guarantee a national curriculum, and they brought a kind of social and political peace between the Catholic and the rest of the society. Today, they are challenging by Muslims, Islamic representatives, not radical Islamic, but Muslims and Muslim community would want to develop their schools, their religious schools, in fact. And there's a strong opposition to the development of these Muslim schools to maintain the pact between the Catholic and the public policy makers. So because of this awakening and a new Catholic right, more active in education through philanthropic associations, through foundation, etc., you can observe a kind of public voice of Catholic interest groups, which was not the case 20 or 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they try to lobbying in policy making, in education policy making. That's very interesting. So it explains that an improbable space of interest like the Collège des Jacobins is capable to gather representative of Catholic interest and representative of secular interest, laïcité in France, on the same, around the same table. Mm-hmm. You couldn't imagine that 20 years ago, and that very revealing, it reveals this kind of third way behind Macron, etc., and this kind of melting between rightist and leftist interest to get the interest by reforms, again, the radical left, mm-hmm. and a kind of radical traditionalism, at least the SNES. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know quite well the French education system, but yes, the SNES and it is Communist Party, historically the Communist Party, and so on. So mm-hmm. that's very interesting. And I just noted that. It's quite difficult to go deeper in that, but I can prove Collège des Jacobins, the seminar, and I can locate these people, and this network I've built. What I've built there is based on evidence. Mm-hmm. I can mm-hmm. show the links.
Yes, I understand. Uma última questão e termina, e calma, se é possível. É possível, Teresa?
Não sei se há mais alguém que queira colocar questões, porque estás aqui um bocadinho. Uhum. Se houver mais alguém, não sei, só para podermos distribuir isto equitativamente antes do fecho, porque estamos perto das 5h30. Não há? Pronto, então tens a palavra para a tua questão, Vitor.
Another question, Monsieur Romualdo. Comment vous expliquez les mauvais résultats, les moyens résultats du PISA et le turnover qui existe toujours des enseignants en France?
I'm quite worried about the way you're questioning me, in fact, because in questioning me, you make me assume that PISA is a good measurement and a good tool for ranking student scores and student skills. I completely disagree with that. I don't think at all that PISA is a good instrument for ranking student skills and compare them. But I can, so, you know, so the first part of my answer to you, because if you assume that PISA is a good measurement tool on measuring tool, and with that you can measure the gap, the widening gap in terms of inequalities of French students, you legitimize the reformist vision that I try to objectivize and to take distance from, you know. So that's a problem for me, in fact, you know, because in fact there's a confusion in France with this ideal of equal opportunity and what PISA measure as an inequality gap. But in fact, the inequality gap, which is measured by the PISA survey, has nothing to do with the Republican ideal of equality of opportunities. You know, it's a kind of ideological confusion between the two, you know, because the PISA survey is a measuring tool which has been built according to a vision of human capital theorists, human capital economists. They consider that PISA is a good measurement of the effectiveness, performance, and quality of education system. So there's nothing to do with equality at all, you know, and it is backed by researchers of the school effectiveness research who at the school level consider that you can measure the reduction of inequalities by developing school effectiveness indicators, value-added indicators, which is quite different from the measurement of equality of opportunity. So from that, I can answer to your question that, of course, there is some exclusion, you know, in the French education system between education priority areas and schools where, you know, students are ghettoized and are, you know, there's no school mix, and they have low qualified teachers, and they suffered from discrimination and, you know, and ostracism from the rest of the population. And you've got, of course, schools in gentry urban areas with selected students who are prepared to get into the grande école or French colleges, in fact. So this dual system, finally, is remaining, in fact. But it's not only a question of measuring student outcomes in reading, mathematics, and sciences, because in fact, this measurement of reading, skills reading in reading, mathematics, and science, and measuring from the beginning of schooling, it's a way to measure investment in human capital. It's not a way to measure the capacity of students to better access to secondary education and to higher education. So there's a kind of political hypocrisy in France, in fact, saying that in developing national assessment, you work on behalf of the reduction of equality of opportunity, because in fact, in France, you can escape from this discourse, but the right using equality of opportunity, the left using equality of opportunity, but the vision by the left, by the right, inside the left or inside the right are not the same, in fact. So it becomes a kind of motto, a rhetoric, which masks, in fact, a kind of economization of education in France through this, you know, borrowing of human capital economist ideas. And it comes directly from the network of European economists, which has been created by the European Commission, linked to the open method of coordination. You can tap on your computer on Google, European Economists of Education networks, and you will find that they present themselves as a think tank for the European Commission. They are the direct policy advisor of the European Commission. So what France is doing is just, you know, translating the expectation of the European Commission in a national policy linked to European interest and of course to the OECD and to these economists in claiming they work on the reduction of equality of opportunities. So to try to deconstruct that, you need to escape from the French debate, to look at international or European level, the policy traveling, the policy borrowing and lending, and then come into the French context to explain what even French policymakers are doing, sometimes ignoring this policy borrowing themselves, in fact. Because if you talk with a policymaker in France, for example, because it has been translated in the French language, you know, they ignore completely there is some connection with what's going on in the United States or at European level or in the UK, even if we have borrowed a lot of our policy tools from the UK. For example, added value indicators has been borrowed from the UK Department of Education on this school effectiveness unit in a time of Michael Barber, which now is at the McKinsey Group, you know, McKinsey Consulting Group. He has been hired by McKinsey, but he was very close to Tony Blair. Or if you look at the national assessment implemented in France, it's a direct copy of national assessment which had been developed in the UK at the beginning of the 80s. Or if you speak about the socle commun de connaissances et de culture commune, you can resume it in English, basic skills, and it has been invented by the US at the time, the US federal government, Ronald Reagan and the National Commission of Excellence were launching their report, A Nation at Risk, and disseminating in the media. So, you know, but that, what I'm saying that now, lots of people don't know it, policymakers or researchers, or if they know it, they ignore it, and they prefer to ignore it, in fact, for different reasons. Not only to mask the borrowing, but in France, you know, we like to speak about the French culture, the French language, you know, this kind of soft power, so everything is French, you know. And when you look at the CIEP, which is the Centre International d'Études Pédagogiques, you know, it's a center for the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Education. And it's the voice of France. So France is very eager to develop Francophonie, you know, French-speaking relationship and so on. So they don't like to appear to borrow things from the English-speaking world to the neoliberal world, you know. So you've got very skilled policymakers to disseminate that and to translating and buffering these international influences, you know. It made me not much popular in France, but
anyway.
Thank
you very much for kind of
explanation. Thank you. Professor António Teodoro, não sei se ainda quer apresentar o seu slide, mas já estamos passados da hora, não é? Não ouvimos, tem que ligar o micro.
Vou deixar a questão para a última sessão, que é precisamente o desenvolvimento desta última parte que o Romualdo apresentou.
Portanto, podemos encerrar, certo?
Pode.
Então pronto, vamos encerrar o nosso webinar de hoje. Agradeço ao professor João Luís Horta-Neto por ter estado presente. Thank you very much, Romuald. It was an interesting webinar. Vamos então encerrar a nossa sessão. Encontramos-nos recordo que têm no bate-papo os PowerPoints que os nossos oradores gentilmente deixaram. Voltamos a encontrar no dia 16, certo, Vítor? Para mais um webinar aqui com a professora Elsa Estrela e com a professora Diana Sousa, sobre as implicações do PISA no conhecimento oficial. Muito obrigada a todos os que assistiram. Thank you once again for you too. It was a very nice afternoon, very fruitful. See you
soon. Thank you very much for your invitation, Antonio and Teresa, and all the group. And see you. Keep in touch.
Bye-bye.
Merci.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.